We're going back to the 1340s for this one as the Black Plague is ravaging through Florence. Let's talk about Netflix's The Decameron. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my TV review for the new Netflix series, The Decameron. This is available for season 1 right now. There's 8 episodes in total with that, and this follows in the tradition of some of the recent shows on streamers where we're sort of taking the backdrop of, centuries old themes and people and kind of using more current dialogue and contemporary music and stuff like that. So we'll talk about all this here in just a second. But first, let me welcome you back to Dan Reviews It. Thank you for finding this video. We have movie and TV reviews on the channel, and just about every day I post something new. So there's always a lot to check out. With that in mind, please consider subscribing, click that like button, and comment below. Of course, all that stuff helps the channel out. Okay, so this is based on the 14th century Italian short story collection called The Decameron. And I have no idea, how similar it is to that or what kind of themes have been picked up, but in any event, it was kind of inspired by those stories. And this takes place in, like I said, the 1340s, during in Florence, where the Black Death is sort of just on a rampage and just killing everyone. So this follows a group of nobles and their servants as they retreat to wait out the plague in the hills of Tuscany. And so, involved is a lot of sex and drinking and debauchery. And of course, some class warfare as well. Since we have the nobles along with their servants, and some people that you may recognize from this show. So Zosia Mamet, who is David Mamet's, I think, daughter. She was in The Flight Attendant. Saoirse Monica Jackson, who was in Dairy Girls for many years. Tony Hale, of course, from Arrested Development and Veep and many other things. He's a part of this as well. Those are the only people really I recognized, although I'm sure these people have done some other things. A lot of sort of British people in this that probably have done a lot, for the BBC or whatever that I maybe just haven't seen. But in any event, so this follows in the tradition of a lot of these recent shows that I was mentioning. I didn't mention by name, but like Bridgerton is a good example of that. That's also on Netflix, of course. That's a more dramatic take, I think, or more soapy kind of take, less of a comedy. But obviously, you've got the contemporary, music and kind of the violin instrumental forms and whatnot in there. But no, this is, I think, closer to things like The Great on Hulu, or Our Flag Means Death on HBO, or Dickinson on Apple TV Plus, where you have people saying kind of contemporary things, but, we're set, way, way back when, in, centuries old, wherever, in this particular case, the 1340s. But I don't know if The Great actually uses contemporary dialogue, or they just use kind of the snark of today with the words from back then. I would say that's probably, for me anyway, the gold standard of this type of show is The Great. And so there's a lot of things that can be learned kind of from that show that I don't think this show quite learned its lessons from. And I would say the biggest flaw, well, this show has a few flaws. It's a mixed bag for sure. It's definitely a middling grade. It's not necessarily a negative grade, but let's talk about some of the negatives first. I think this show does not need to be an hour long. Like when we think of comedy shows, most of them are in that sort of half hour, 35-minute vein, maybe if you're on a streamer. But Bridgerton, sure, that's an hour. But again, that is more of a drama, soap opera kind of thing. Whereas all of the other shows I mentioned are, 25 to 30 minutes. And I think that's maybe where this could have been better suited. The reason is, I think some of the plots seem a bit stretched out. There's, minutes long conversations or plots that sort of don't go anywhere and don't add anything, and also are not nearly as funny as the show thinks they are. I think this show feels, like it's too clever for the room. I think it thinks it's funnier than it is. And it's just, when compared to, like, The Great, I think is, a great show. And that's been nominated for Best Comedy Show, I think at the Emmys, maybe the Golden Globes as well. So obviously people are loving that. This one, I think, it sort of took that ball and was like, oh, we can sort of do similar things, and say these pithy comments, while sort of, oh, holding a mirror up to today's society. And all right, but it's been done to death, really. No pun intended here with the plague, but all of these shows, kind of have that sort of vibe to them, and this one isn't really saying anything new. Now, I will admit it is definitely funny in places. Tony Hale for me, is probably again one of the standouts. We don't realize, Buster Bluth on Arrested Development was such an oddball character that Tony Hale was certainly funny in that role, but the writing was so sharp. It was hard to tell. Okay, is Tony Hale funny, or is the writing just that good? And I think it's a combination of both. And we saw that again in Veep. He plays these sort of people who, I don't know, think that they're sharper than they are, kind of like the show itself, I guess, here. And just his comic timing is great. And he has really good chemistry with the female co-stars as well. So that part is great. I think some of the performances are good. I'm not positive that the time period is getting all the hairstyles right or anything, but that sort of goes hand in hand with, all right, we're just going to sort of throw caution to the wind about the exact time period we're in, sort of thing. I don't know. It does a little bit of a disservice, to the show, in my opinion. But the other thing with the timeline, like the hour-long format is, you're on a streamer. Netflix has shows that are 35 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes. All of these episodes could have been probably like 40 minutes. They're not, streamers are not confined to the half-hour format of a network show. I'm not saying this needed to be a half hour, but it does not need to be 50, 55 minutes. It really doesn't. But I will say the soundtrack selections are very choice. They are not necessarily using the most obvious tracks from, it's mostly 80s synth pop music, which is funny because obviously a lot of that stuff does sort of take its roots kind of in, like the goth period. Like there's Depeche Mode songs on here and stuff like that. So it is sort of era appropriate, even though obviously centuries before, but the vibe and the tone is pretty similar. So I think that the soundtrack is really very well done here. But overall, a pretty mixed bag. I will leave the Decameron with a C+. And you can see all 8 episodes of this. I don't know if this is this a mini series. I guess it. No, this just says television series. Okay, so there could be maybe in the future a season 2. I don't know. But for now, season 1 is up on Netflix. All right, thank you so much for watching Dan Reviews It. I'll see you next time.